Eye Contact, a Mark Manning Mystery, Book 2. Author, Michael Kraft. Publisher, Open Road Integrated Media, New York. Narrator, Eric Aust. Saturday, June 26th. What the hell is this? Snorts Neil, flopping the late Saturday edition of Sunday's paper onto the kitchen counter next to Manny, who turns from the last-minute clutter he's washing in the sink. Neil has been out to get a few forgotten items needed for tonight's party. He begins unloading them from a supermarket bag. You told me Zarnick was a quack. I thought you'd rake him over the coals. Instead, you sent him a valentine. Manning turns off the water. I need a little time, he tells Neil, wiping his hands on a dish towel. I'm buying time. Neil stacks several cans of Sterno and turns to face Manning. His accusing tone is softened by its underlying jest. Is that fair to your readers, Mr. Ethical? Aware that Neil has targeted the core issue, Manning tells him, I had to print something, and I don't yet have sufficient facts to tell the whole story. The real story. I hope the public's right to know will ultimately be better served by my temporary willingness to play along with Zarnick. It was a tough call, one I'm not entirely comfortable with, but the decision's made, so I have to run with it. How? Asked Neil, folding the paper bag. Manning stows the newly washed utensils in a drawer. I'm not sure. That's why I invited Zarnick here tonight. Till now, I've met him only on his own turf in his lab, where he's secure in his act. This will be different. He looks out from the kitchen into the main space of the loft. This is our territory, which may allow me to catch him off guard with any luck. He might enjoy a drink or two. Maybe he'll let something slip. Shame on you, says Neil, mocking disapproval. Getting that kindly old man liquored up, a foreigner no less, so you can have your way with him? Don't forget, says Manny. That kindly old man is a liar to the core who had an axe to grind with Cliff Nolan. What's more, he's no foreigner, regardless of what. He isn't. I know what he is. Neil steps across the kitchen aisle and drapes his forearms over Manning's shoulder. He's a celebrity, at least for now, till you blow his cover. He'll add a certain, catch it? Star quality to our big evening. Thanks for snagging him. Neil gives Manning a genial peck on the lips. You're welcome, Manning pecks back. But you're center stage tonight, kiddo. We're unveiling our new home. It's a showcase of your talents, and I couldn't be prouder. Manning pulls Neil tight, and their casual embrace turns serious. As their lips press together, Manning's passions rise, but his thoughts of impromptu lovemaking are dashed by the door buzzer. Curses, said Neil. Foiled again. He gives Manning's crotch a gentle squeeze, then reacts to what he finds there. Good heavens! Say that thought. Count on it, Manning tells him, pulling him close for a last hug. Neil glances toward the door. That should be the caterers. You go put yourself together. I need to review some details with the boys from Happy Happenings. Don't forget to tell them about the peanut butter. Yes, Mark. Neil rolls his eyes. Manning's plot to bait Zarnick with peanut butter seems far-fetched at best. Manning gives him a thumbs up, then crosses to the far end of the loft and climbs an open stairway that leads to their sleeping area and the bath beyond. Neil buzzes open the lobby lock. A minute later, a crew of buffed young men files through the door, bearing an array of chafing dishes, cooler chests, and racks of glassware. Their white polo shirts sport the Happy Happenings logo. Their uniforms are finished off with baggy tan shorts and black combat boots with an inch of white socks protruding from the tops. The procession winds its way toward the kitchen, punctuated by laughter, hoots, and occasional shrieks that belie the paramilitary look of its ranks. Hi there, hun, one of them calls to Neil. He's older than the others and far from lean. It's the boss. Hello, Henry, says Neil. Your troops are looking better than ever. Where do you find these guys? Ha! Says Henry with a toss of his head. Wouldn't you like to know? He shoos a couple of straggling beauties from the hall toward their clones in the kitchen. Upstairs in the bathroom, Manning steps from the shower. No molded plastic stall, but a room in itself, tiled with black Carrara glass, and pauses while toweling himself dry. The man, reflected in a wall-high mirror, looks back at him, then winks. In spite of the sobering events of this past week, the man in the mirror seems pleased with life, pleased with himself, though not at all religious. Manning lost the faith when he was 20. Something. He feels moved at this unlikely moment to count his blessings. He's healthy. He's attractive, not only for a man in his middle years, but judged against any standard. These thoughts make him wonder, am I that vain, narcissistic? Maybe, but objective. If I refuse to delude myself with denial of my foibles, denial of reality, why should I deny my own virtues? Virtue? Funny word for a physical trait. A blessing? Blessing. Funny word for dumb luck. Amazing how the God folk have managed to claim a lexicon of their own, restricted a rational society in the use of its native tongue. Manning recognizes that he enjoys other blessings that are not the booty of luck, but the reward of his own efforts. The success of his career is the most obvious of these blessings, attested to by the respect of his peers and the growth of his readership. With it has come material blessings. The marble-floored bath is a good example. The car, the comfortable lifestyle. What he wants, he buys. His affluence, he knows, is not entirely the result of his reporting skills and his journal paycheck. There was the cash reward for his work on that high-profile missing person case. But he earned that, didn't he? There was the inheritance from his uncle in Wisconsin. Okay, that was dumb luck. And there has been the pooling of resources with Neil, an architect with a thriving career of his own. Ah, yes, Neil, the greatest of Manning's blessings. Did he earn such a gift? Was it chance? How could he account for the affections of another human being, for the melding of two minds, for their mutual past and their planned future, for the proprietary right they have granted each other to share their bodies in bed, or after a run, or whenever they feel the spark? How can he account for love? It was luck. He might never have met Neil, who turned out to be the right man at the right time, but Manning also earned their love. He willed it. The accumulated frustrations of his heterosexual life before Neil, while disturbing, were not sufficient to nudge him into the arms of the first willing man who came along. Manning's frustrations were accompanied by the emotional baggage of a lifetime, by definitions he had set for and of himself, by a gut-deep fear of queer and faggot and all those other labels. There were mind dragons to fight, demons to conquer, before he could banish uncertainty and redefine himself, but he did it, and he has never looked back. The man in the mirror has an erection. Manning laughs, wraps the towel around his waist, and works his fingers through his hair, deciding that a wind-tossed look will suit the evening's festivities better than his usual comb and brush. He says to his reflection, lots of blessings, ample sunshine, no clouds on the horizon. The man in the mirror frowns. What about the clouds of his dreams? The pretty pink clouds of planet Zarnick are not what they seem. Their playful tendrils are wisps of unknown gases that might sear the lungs if swallowed. Caution. Manny reminds himself that tonight's celebration will be tempered by the arrival of a mystery guest, the man who claims to be Pavo Zarnick, and there is still the great looming question of Cliff Nolan's murder. What's wrong? Asks Neil, reacting to Manning's frown as he enters the bathroom, ready for his own shower. He wears only lounge shorts. A happy evening is in the works, and Henry has assembled a crew of first-class eye candy. Manning smiles, hugging Neil. He tells him, "You're all the eye candy I'll ever need. I'm a lucky man. He just happens to be momentarily put off by his work." Neil peers at him. "Don't let this get to you, Mark. At least not tonight." "No," says Manning, tracing his thumbs along Neil's pectorals. "Tonight's a celebration. If I happen to glean a stray tidbit from Zarnick, all the better." He crooks his head to lick one of Neil's nipples, then kisses the other. Neil says into his ear, "Get dressed. Our guests are due. But save that thought." A few minutes later, Manning stands in the dressing area of the balcony, deciding on an outfit for the evening. Pleated khaki slacks, No surprise, though these are gabardine, a dressier version of the twill variety he always wears to the office. An easy decision, but the top half vexes him. Jacket and tie? That's what he'd normally wear, but Neil won't. Not at home. Too stuffy. Then he thinks, why not try a t-shirt with a vest? He's seen younger guys wear such outfits. Hell, why not? That looks great, says Neil, panning out from the bath. Think so? Asks Manny, needing a reassurance. I'm not too old for it? Hardly, says Neil. You'll be the hottest man in the room. What about the catering boys? Manning asks. Neil pauses. They don't count. They're paid to be here. A few minutes later, Neil is dressed, and he and Manning head downstairs to await their first arrival. As they cross the main room toward the kitchen, a voice from behind asks, Can I get you guys a drink? Manning turns to find one of the Happy Happenings waiters standing there with a tray. He wears an engraved plastic name tag. Justin. Not on his shirt, but below his belt, on his hip. Neil was right. This kid's a knockout. Something before your guest arrive. Manning and Neil eye each other with a look that asks, Should we? Neil tells the waiter, We'll both have vodka on the rocks. The Japanese brand with a twist of orange. Just the peel. Manning nods his agreement and watches the waiter strut away to fill their order. The knotty muscles of Justin's calves bulge from the top of his boots. Music is playing now, and it sounds great. A familiar, nameless cocktail tune, but there's some sort of commotion in the kitchen. I'd better keep an eye on things, says Neil, following Justin. Manning stands alone in the center of the room, telling himself that all is ready, that he looks just fine. When the buzzer yelps, shattering his fragile confidence, he looks about wondering who'll answer the door, then realizes that the task has fallen to him. He assumes that all the staff has arrived, that whoever has buzzed must be the first guest. Manning swallows, crosses to the door, and swings it open. Happy new home, gorgeous, says Daryl, flinging his arms around Manning for a full-body hug. A herd of other copy kids and journal interns piles in behind him. The party has begun. Justin nudges through the crowd with his little silver tray balanced overhead on the prongs of his fingertips. Your cocktail, Mr. Manning. Thank you. Manning takes the drink, needing it, having managed to disentangle himself from Daryl, who now stares at the waiter with wide, unbelieving eyes, like a lucky cat who has stumbled upon a fat, fated mouse. Justin asked the guest, What can I get you? Honey, says Daryl, brushing up next to him, you've got it all backwards. What can I do for you? In the same breath, he has his arm around Justin's shoulder and walks him away from the group to explore the loft. Manning takes a gulp of the vodka. Come on in, gang. With a shrug, he tells them, There's plenty more where that came from, knowing as the words leave his lips how insipid they sound. He's certain he's blown it, doomed the whole evening by his lack of social finesse. But his young guests aren't fazed. Indeed, they laugh at his comment as if hearing it newly coined. They gape and coo at the artful transformation of the loft, wishing him happiness amid interjections of congrats and way cool. Their enthusiasm, he can tell, is genuine, and he wants to share it with Neil, whose creativity has shaped these surroundings. As if summoned by Manning's thoughts, Neil appears. Manning asks him, You know everyone, don't you? We were just singing your praises. The arrivals number about a dozen college age or so, both men and women. Neil has met most of them at previous gatherings or in the city room of the Journal, where he sometimes meets Manning for lunch date. While newsroom attire is generally conservative, the trend toward the casual has been evidenced even there, especially by these journalists in training. A copy boy can wear jeans to the office without thinking twice, but he knows instinctively that tank tops are beyond the limit. Tonight is different, though. It's a party, and while it's hosted by the paper's star reporter, there's a general consensus that he and Neil are totally rad. So these guests have dressed as they pleased. It's been a hot week in the city, and the younger crowd has responded by bearing some flesh. Some of the girls wear tube tops with skirts that remind Manning of his youth in the liberated 60s. Some of the guys wear shorts and sandals. One of them wears a vest, like Manning's, but without a t-shirt underneath, displaying shifting glimpses of his tanned torso. He also shows a tattoo, and he's not the only one. This is a trend that Manning has noticed. Bewildered, no longer the blue collar insignia that were once limited to anchors, eagles, or hearts with ribbons bearing mother or the name of an erstwhile gal. These new tattoos are much smaller, worn by well-educated youngsters of both sexes in unexpected places. On the ankle, for instance, or the shoulder blade, or God knows where. They are tributes, neither to patriotism nor to love, but to beer brands, cartoon characters, and pop music fads. It's another sign of growing older, Manning tells himself. When you can't figure out why kids do what they do, try to keep an open mind. Neil says, "Hey guys, the bar's in the kitchen. Have fun." And they will. They pass around Neil, offering pats on the back, making a beeline for the booze. Neil tells Manning, "That's what I like about youth, aside from their obvious visual charms. They're so easily amused." Again the buzzer. "Your turn," says Manning, sweeping his hand from Neil toward the door. Neil opens it, and in steps David Bosch with his two out-of-town guests. David wears an outfit similar to the uniforms of the catering staff, but with a preppy loafers instead of boots. His shorts and knit shirt confirm that a fantasy body has lurked all along beneath his office attire. Neil gives Manning a private Groucho twitch of his eyebrows, a silent allusion to David's obvious visual charms. Pink clouds. Manning realizes that his earlier tally of clouds on the horizon failed to include David, whose newly revealed doting is a sticky, unexpected development. "Hi, David," says Neil, shaking his hand. "Welcome to our humble home." "Awesome," says David, who then cringes at the word. Then he turns to his older companions for a round of introductions. The woman is 50-something, fashionable and handsome, not quite pretty. She wears tailored slacks and a vibrant red silk blouse. The man is in his 60s, balding, slim, and dapper. He wears a dark silk suit, lightened for the occasion by a jaunty yellow necktie with matching pocket handkerchief. David says, "Claire and Hector, I'd like you to meet Mark Manning of the Journal." David beams with pride, then adds sheepishly, "I don't have to tell you, Mark's the best in the business." Manning rolls his eyes, saying, "David, please." David continues, "And this is Mark's friend, Neil Waite, an architect who's involved with the planning of Celebration 2000. Then turning to Neil and Manning, David says, "Gentlemen, please, meet Claire Gray and my uncle, Hector Bush." They all shake hands, honored to know one another. Manning concludes by telling David's guest, "Welcome to Chicago. We're delighted to have you in town." Claire tells him, "The theater committee was kind enough to invite us for the opening ceremonies during 4th of July weekend. We were thrilled to be asked." Hector says, "And since I've spent no time whatever with my favorite nephew, my one and only actually, since his earlier salad days in college, this trip provides me a perfect opportunity to scrutinize his new life among the Second City's Fourth Estate. So I'm prepared to be impressed. Mr. Manning, naturally I'll be filling reviews of the theater festival." "I should have guessed," says Manning, recognizing the mannered prose that is a hallmark of Hector's columns. He adds, "And please call me Mark." Hector and Claire invite Manning and Neil to use their own first names as well. Manning offers, "Let me get you a drink." Hector and Claire both decide on Kerr. Manning asks for help from David, who gladly tails him to the bar, leaving Neil to get acquainted with the New Yorkers. He says, "It's a shame, Claire, that your schedule won't allow you to direct part of the theater festival. I feel terrible about it, darling, but my commitments back east were chiseled in stone. They tell me, so I'll be watching the efforts of others for a change." Which is really quite a nice idea when you think about it. She flips her palms in the air. "I'm on vacation." "Yes, my dearest," says Hector. "So I've noticed, especially while I've been chained to that damned modem in our hotel room." "Poor baby," man may work from sun to sun, but Hector's work is never done. Dryly, Hector tells her. Your sympathy is appreciated more than you know. Then he asks Neil, what can we expect at the opening ceremonies next week and at the stadium? Neil ushers them away from the door toward a furniture grouping that anchors the central space of the loft. With a gesture, he invites them to sit. He tells Hector, the plans are changing daily, but it ought to be spectacular. The nation's top talent from pop to opera will be there doing snippets for a capacity crowd and a worldwide TV audience. But the festival isn't only about the performing arts. We'll also put the visual arts, the practical arts, and the sciences center stage. And then there's the whole political aspect. The human rights rally and the president's address, assuming he decides to accept the committee's invitation. Bravo, Claire tells him. That's exactly the sort of coordinated effort that stands a chance to make a meaningful difference to society. When the brightest minds come together not only to entertain but to inspire, then we can all begin to move ahead. For the first time in memory, I'm actually looking forward to a presidential election, to say nothing of the broad public debate that will precede it. You needn't wait till the election, Neil tells her. The broad public debate has already begun. The Christian Family Crusade has announced plans to stage a rally of its own, countering the event at the stadium. They're mounting a protest march as part of the grand opening of that luxury hotel they've built in the north side, the Gethsemane Arms. Have you ever heard anything so ludicrous? Hector admonishes Neil. I wouldn't be so quick to judge. The CFC has flourished under the prudent financial management of its current leadership. Even more important, they stand for principles held dear by a great many Americans. Like what? Asked Claire. Intolerance and bigotry. They've been in the limelight too long already, and with any luck, they'll find their influences waned. It should be a wide-open race next year, and maybe this country will at last engage itself in a rational exchange of ideals. I hope so, says Neil, sitting back, crossing his arms. That's why we've invited presidential hopefuls from both parties, as well as that upstart libertarian to take part in the ceremonies. If we can begin to establish common ground on only one issue, human rights, which, of course, includes gay rights, a topic that's near and dear to me, our efforts will be proven worthwhile. Attempting to shift the topic, Hector says, I understand where the arts and politics fit into all this, but how do you plan to include the sciences? Neil's eyes gleam. He leans forward to say, that's the best part. It hasn't been publicized, but arrangements have been made for a state-of-the-art sky show. A laser spectacle will appear over the whole loop and near North Side, with the new stadium at its center. As the president concludes his speech, in effect, a changing of the guard and ushering in of the new age, the sky above the city will burst alive with the light of a laser show, a giant floating pink triangle. Good Lord, says Claire. How does it work? It will be projected from masts atop 3 tall buildings, the Sears Tower, Mid-America Oil, and the Journal Building, forming the points of the triangle. It'll blow people's minds, and the show will be repeated each night of the celebration into the year 2000. Sounds like a marvelous spectacle, says Hector. But why pink? Claire eyes him as though he should know better. Really, Hector, the pink triangle symbolizes gay liberation. Ah, yes, he says, an allusion to the paper badges of Nazi death camps. Odd choice for the graphic identity of a progressive social movement. Rather grim, isn't it? It was, certainly, says Neil. Symbols can be powerful weapons, and the pink triangle originated as a symbol of hate. But by claiming it as our own, we have not only defamed it, we've been empowered by it. Such a metamorphosis may sound like voodoo. I know, but it truly happens in the same way much of the gay community has embraced the term queer. Hector winces, noting his discomfort with the direction their conversation is taken. Neil asked, Is something wrong, Hector? Not in the least. His tone is curt and unconvincing. Claire offers, Hector has been a tan and easy with gay issues of late. Sorry, says Neil, the accommodating host. I presume, well, you're from New York, involved with theater? I have many gay friends, Hector assures him. A person's sexual preference or orientation or identity, or whatever the correct buzz of the day happens to be, is of no concern to me at all. Unless, interjects Claire, that person happens to be your nephew. Claire, Hector admonishes her, as though she had betrayed a confidence. Hey, no problem, Neil says offhandedly, trying to ease the tension. I already know about David. I've had vibes, although it would be more precise to say he's heard rumors. He assumes that Hector would not appreciate such wording. Clara leans to tell Neil, Hector has always felt protective of David. This unexpected turn in his life has left Hector feeling unable to guide the boy. Resigned to the fact that he will not be able to sidetrack this discussion, Hector decides that Neil should hear details from the source. I hope not to sound mawkish, he says, but I've always thought of David as more of a son than a nephew. Although I've been married, briefly, more than once, I have no children of my own, and now, of course, it's too late to begin a family. Even if Claire would consent to be my bride. I've asked her on occasion, by the way, yet she seems obstinately determined to enter her later years, still single, with no pretense, I might add, of maidenhood. He casts her a visual jab. She responds with an exasperated look that says, they've covered this ground before. He continues, so, David, my brother's son, has been lent to me from time to time over the years. A little boy I could help rear in life's finer ways. His parents are good people, hard-working Midwesterners who've given him the security and love that any child deserves. And they've had the common sense to recognize that David's upbringing could be enriched by a sophisticated uncle in Manhattan, none other than yours truly. I've introduced him not only to the theater, but to music. I've shown him the world, at least the parts that count. Paris one Easter, Rome for Christmas, theater trips to London, whenever possible. During his high school years, he spent entire summers with me, enjoying life from a penthouse overlooking Central Park, taking advantage of the best the city has to offer. Hector pauses, touches up the knot of his necktie, and settles further into the sofa, one arm draped elegantly along its back. Unmistakable pride colors his voice as he continues. It was also during those summers that David got a first-hand look at my day-to-day life as a writer, which nurtured his own budding interest in journalism. I was as thrilled as his parents when he was accepted at Northwestern, and I'm overjoyed that he's now launching his career at the Journal. Who knows, maybe one day he'll be ready for the Times. Hector again pauses, saving the prospect of his nephew's advancement without needing to clarify that the Times on his mind is the one in New York. Returning to his story, he says, I had become his Auntie May. We joked about it. Claire, too. Life is a banquet and all that, but after David entered college, his summers got busy, so his visits became shorter and less frequent. He was growing up, developing into his own person, acquiring new interests, such as bodybuilding, which I've never understood. Hector shudders at the thought of David's incessant weight training. He tenses, leans forward. Then during the semester break of his senior year, he came to spend a couple of weeks with me. I found it unusual because he seemed especially eager to visit New York, which is anything but pleasant in January. His first night there, while we were at dinner, he told me he had a big news. The Chicago Journal was taking him on as an intern. He mentioned that he'd visited the newsroom earlier that week and had met Mark Manny, whom he had long held in high esteem. He judged the experience to be an omen of great things to come, explaining that the Journal's cub reporters are typically hired from the pool of interns who are finishing college. So we celebrated his good fortune that night amid toasts to the future. The smile that is reflected Hector's happy remembrance fades as he tells them. Surprised as I was by the news he delivered, I was even less prepared for the other morsel he would soon divulge to me. We spent most of our evenings together at the theater, then at dinner, which could last till past midnight. Instead of returning with me to the apartment to retire, David began staying out on his own, telling me he wanted to explore the nightlife. This seemed reasonable for a man of his age, and I didn't give it much thought. He was always up and about the next morning before I was fixing breakfast, over which he'd share tales of the previous night's exploits. I marveled at his energy, which seemed boundless. Hector again fixes the knot of his tie, but there's no need. It's still perfect. One morning, however, David hadn't returned. While making coffee, I heard the front door. A few moments later, he stood in the hallway to the kitchen. I told him, I may not be your mother, but I deserve an explanation. He asked me to sit down and join me at the table. He poured coffee for us both as I reached to pick up the cup. He took my hand into his and looked me in the eye. I have something to tell you, he said. I'm sure you can guess what it was. Neil coughs. I have an inkling. He'd been hitting the bars that week. Gay bars, it turned out. And on that last night, he went home with someone. Why? I asked him. Are you sure? I stuttered through the predictable litany of questions. Calmly, David explained that he'd been wrestling with this for several years, since the start of college, that he'd had no satisfaction from his flings with women. The previous summer, he'd stayed on at the apartment he kept near school, and during those months, less pressured by the demands of classes and the expectations of friends, he found himself, he said, and became comfortable with his self-awareness as a homosexual. Hector's discourse has grown agitated, and he starts to rise from the sofa as if he needs to pace. But he stops short of standing, plops back into his seat, and gestures with both palms open, as if beseeching Claire and Neil to understand. Flustered, I suggested that his comfort level should end right there. Keep this to yourself, I warned him. If you take this any further, if you spread the news, it will probably kill your parents and will certainly thwart your career. In truth, David's parents are open-minded and tolerant, but I was afraid to predict how my brother might react to learning that his son had gone gay during one of his visits to dear old worldly Uncle Hector. Claire crosses her arms. She eyes Hector with an accusing stare. Wouldn't it be more accurate to say that you were afraid your brother might think it was you who turned David gay? That's bullshit, says Hector, in no mood for honesty. But Claire persists. Come on, Hector. Theater, ballet, opera, French lessons in 3rd grade. So the kid might find his way around a menu. The costume parties and opening nights and weekend excursions to Provincetown. Of course, David's parents would conclude that you dangled a tantalizing plum before their baby. But the point is, Hector, you've done that all along, and they've known it. They've known that you live in a milieu that might appeal to their son, and they've never denied him the opportunity to be with you. In fact, they've encouraged it. So I don't understand. She stopped short, having thought of something. My God, do you think they'd suspect you'd slept with David? For Christ's sake, Claire, they'd know better. They've often razzed me about the effete company I keep, and I admit that I project something of an affected persona, but they understand, as I'm sure you do, that I'm playing a role. I'm a theater critic, New York-based, nationally syndicated, with a public that likes to imagine me as a glib socialite. I have no problem with that. Indeed, I enjoy it. But I am not gay, which you know better than anyone. David's parents know it too. I would never take advantage of their son under any circumstances. Neil clears his throat and wonders aloud. Where are Mark and David with those drinks? The party is filling in with other guests, and there's a crowd at the bar near the kitchen. Neil spots Victor Utley, someone from the mayor's office, who's had his fingers in much of the committee work for Celebration 2000, returning his attention to Claire and Hector's discourse. Neil cautiously enters the conversation. I'm sure you're right, he tells Hector. Intelligent people no longer fear gay recruiting. Gays have always known instinctively what is now accepted as fact. Sexual orientation is in you. It's genetic. And it's there from day one. Okay, says Claire, conceding the issue. But then I'm all the more bewildered, Hector. Why are you so uncomfortable with David's homosexuality? You are glib. I've rarely seen you frenzied by anything more serious than a sluggish first act. What could possibly concern you about something so pedestrian as your nephew's sex life? It's not rational. I never claimed it was rational, but it troubles me. I'm worried. Neil asks him. It's AIDS, isn't it? Hector looks from Neil to Claire, whose eyes ask, Well, is it? Hector exhales, then he lays the issue bare. Of course it's AIDS. The worry wrenches my gut. I don't give a damn what David does with his dick. Do excuse my rather crude indulgence in alliteration, but I don't want him to die doing it. He's at exactly the age when he should explore life to its fullest, tasting from the banquet, but in historical terms, this is exactly the wrong age to belly up to that smorgasbord. He pauses to clear his mind, then sums up his concerns. If David became infected, his parents would never forgive me for introducing him to a world turned deadly. Worse yet, I could never forgive myself. The tenderness of Claire's smile declares a truce in their squabbling, revealing that her affection for Hector is deepened by the knowledge that his displeasure with David's gayness is ultimately selfless and loving. She pats his hand, then she turns to Neil. Where are Mark and David with those drinks? The music has kept pace with the changing tempo of the party, and the tasteful cocktail tunes have segued to jazzier selections that sound a tad nasty. Some of the guests have started dancing, others graze at the buffet, but most are clumped near the bar, reaching for drinks, greeting acquaintances, marveling at the loft, flirting with the boys from Happy Happenings. Kerr, Manning tells the bartender over the din, nor Kirsch. He passes back the two snifters. Put a spoonful of cassis in white wine. David says, leave it to Uncle Hector to stump the help. He'd never think to ask for gin and tonic. Your basic hot weather standby. He shrugs as if to offer a lame apology for his uncle's defined taste. David downs the last of his drink, the second gin and tonic he has managed to procure during the confusion over the cur. He orders a third. Easy there, Manning tells him. The night is young, and David smirks. Promises, promises. God help me, Manning tells David. Take this, will you? It's one of the curs. Manning carries the other along with his own drink. Jostling through the crowd, David spots one of the Journal's new interns, just hired for the summer. There's a splotch on the back of his hand, and he's showing it off. Tough tat, says David, leaning to admire a little portrait of Beavis. Thanks, dude. As they move onward with the drinks, Manning says, I hate to sound like an old fart, but what's with these tattoos? David gives him a vacant, I don't know, look. Lots of kids are doing it. Just a trend. I mean, Manning grapples for the words. It's so permanent. Trends are fine. They're fun. By definition, fashion is fleeting. But an entire generation will go to their graves wearing those. I imagine we will, says David, agreeing but not caring. We? Says Manning, stopping right there. You mean... Now he's truly curious. Where? David laughs. Relax, Mark. My we merely acknowledge a membership in Generation X. Isn't that what you call us? I'm not into tattoos. That's kid stuff. Thank God, says Manning, visibly relieved. Not so fast, David sounds a note of warning. I'm into something else entirely. He fixes Manning in his stare. Manning returns the stare, half smiling, half sure that David isn't serious. Okay, what? Not telling. Not yet. Smart ass. I love it when you talk like that. David, says Manning through clenched teeth. Behave. They've arrived to deliver drinks to Hector and Claire, who seem involved in a serious discussion with Neil. Sorry for the delay, Manning tells them, handing out glasses. There was a bit of mayhem at the bar. Thank you, dear, says Claire. It's rare that I need hooch, but frankly my tongue was hanging out. She drinks. Really, Claire? Hector doesn't quite approve of his companion's hearty thirst, but succumbing to his own, he joins her, downing half the glass. Manning says, It looked as though you were all having a fairly heavy talk. Just party chat, says Neil, comparing notes on some of the guests. Oh, says Manning. Anyone I know? Hector tells him. One of your colleagues. Nothing important. Claire says to Manning. On the topic of your colleagues, that was dreadful news this week about the Journal science editor. We all feel terrible about Cliff Nolan, says Manny. David and I have been assigned to work on an investigation of his murder. Our publisher, Nathan Kane, thinks that the police could use some help. Looking up from where he sits, Neil asks, "How's it going? Any suspects?" "Several," Manny answers, "but nothing firm yet." He's unwilling to say more. Seating himself next to Claire, David tells Manny, "As long as we're into shop talk, I have some questions about your big weekend story on Professor Zarnick." I'm sure," says Manny. He sits next to Neil, completing the circle. "As I explained to Neil earlier, I'm not ready to expose Zarnick yet. Everyone knew the story was slated, so I had to stall." Manny notices Hector and Claire exchanging a quizzical glance. He asks David, "Haven't you filled them in?" David mimes a zipped lip. Manny tells David, "Well, I admire your restraint, but I think we can take them into our confidence. In fact, I'd find an outside perspective helpful." Manning tells them the background of the story. Then he and David recount details of their visit to the planetarium. Manning concludes, "So, even though I'm reasonably sure that Dr. Zarnick's an imposter, I haven't a clue as to who he really is or why he has faked this discovery. What's more," Manning hesitates, "there's a possibility that he's somehow related to Cliff Nolan's murder. That's why I invited him here tonight. Maybe I'll catch him from another angle." Hector and Claire have listened to every word, astonished that the man who claims to be Zarnick might be involved in a murder plot. Not to mention that he would attempt to pull off such a large-scale ruse. Claire says, "He surely doesn't think he can get away with it, at least not for long." Manning agrees. "It's nuts. I don't care how remote and tiny he claims his planet to be if it's not where he says it is. People are going to find it out. Oh my God, he's even piqued the curiosity of the Department of Defense." "Maybe they're not so dumb," says Neil. "Maybe they're behind it." "Yeah," says David. "A reasonable theory," Manning concurs. "But why would the Pentagon have an interest in deceiving the public about an astronomical discovery? Look, I was an adolescent during Vietnam, which was less than enough. I still harbor a healthy disdain for the military and most of what it does, including their blood pittings and their double-standard adultery trials. They're certainly not above deception. They'll justify anything in the name of national security, but this doesn't make sense. I may not trust them, but I don't think they're stupid." Hector has been silent since the start of the discussion, but now he asks Manning, "Your publisher, Nathan Kane? What's his role in the Zarnick story?" "He has military connections from way back," says Manny, "and he used his pull to strike a deal that will give the journal a huge advantage in satellite communications. The Pentagon is even helping him with the computer power and stuff. But now they've called in the favor. For some reason, Zarnick is set on using me as his mouthpiece. So Kane's been instructed to have me do some digging. On the surface, it would appear that Zarnick's deception is meant to be conveyed from me, through Kane, to the Pentagon. But that doesn't wash if the Pentagon itself is involved." Hector asks, "What about Kane?" Manning sips his drink and answers, "He's a man of supreme integrity. I don't agree with all of his politics, and I don't even find him especially likable, but I do respect him. Yes, he's an odd man, a powerful man, whose behavior is sometimes quirky, but he's a consummate journalist and businessman, and a patriot to his very marrow. He loves this country. If, in fact, the Pentagon is tinkering with a conspiracy, they've involved Nathan Kane unwittingly, and it offends me to think he could be used as a patsy. If that's the case, he could be in danger, which is why I wrote the story you've all read. I can't tip my hand yet. We don't know what's at stake." Neil whistles pensively. "Heavy duty. I don't know about the rest of you, but I could use another drink." A Gay Mysteries audiobooks. I think it is easy to hate a label, but a face humanizes the word. So this effort is twofold: to offer comfort to those like myself that your world didn't end because you don't fit into the view of acceptable society on both sides, and in hopes of helping those with family that are LGBTQ, that it doesn't mean we are aliens from the child they once knew. Reassure them so they can maybe be supportive at the same time. and being true to their values.